Life is incredibly short and precious. The number of years with which we possess both the maturity but also the mental energy to engage in worthwhile work is small, perhaps 40 years at most. How will you spend these precious moments on this earthly plane? Do you sense something nagging as you prepare spreadsheets, proofread reports, and write lines of code, a feeling of pointlessness? As if you are doing a glorified arts and crafts project, nothing but busy work. You receive a salary for said busy work. But in reality, this can be better understood as getting a share of the spoils of the surplus extracted from those who actually created value. Value has been elusively hard to define, and different schools of economic thought have offered varying definitions. I would offer a definition of value that incorporates both a material and a metaphysical aspect. You provide value by helping produce the goods and services that contribute to the flourishing of humanity. The most basic type of value is found in anything that directly helps preserve and reproduce human life. Here, value can take on material component, such as in the provision of food, clothes, and basic shelter. There are also essential functions, such as the provision of medical care, that would make it to this list, as well as the infrastructure shown to prolong human life and reduce illness, such as sewage and clean drinking water. However, we soon reach a point where morality must be invoked. This runs counter to most economic theory, where desires can vary by individual and no value judgments are attached to any particular desire. Rather, most economists believe that the success of a society can be determined by the extent to which all individuals' desires are satisfied in the aggregate. Take two societies, for instance, where in one, individuals have a strong desire to watch pornography, binge eat, and spend hours glued to their phones. In the other society, individuals get their kicks out of building things, reading the Bible, and doing free yard work for old ladies. As long as members in each society maximize their desires, economic theory says nothing as to the desirability of one society versus the other. Take a moment to reflect on the fact that the vast majority of economists believe that this is the best way of modeling reality. A reality where the ultimate value of a good or service is reduced to its price. After all, if enough people are willing to pay a certain amount for something, then it must be valuable. Who are we to judge their desires? The ultimate value of a job is then tied to its salary. High-end prostitutes are therefore incredibly valuable to society. So are the top 1% of OnlyFans content creators. Indeed, many mid-six-figure management positions, which us mere mortals may judge as dubious, such as Chief Diversity Officer, must add tremendous value to a company, since a central tenet of mainstream neoclassical economics asserts that no rational organization would pay an employee an amount greater than the value they produce. And this gets back to us, the middle-class email caste, who spend much of our time in front of a screen. Mainstream economics would suggest that our work is incredibly vital to the functioning of society, given the growth over the past 3 decades of jobs requiring our various skill sets. This, of course, requires simplistic assumptions that have no bearing on reality, such as that elusive, perfectly free market. When class politics and institutions enter the mix, a rather different picture emerges. Peter Turchin, in his excellent book Ages of Discord, highlights how elite overproduction often leads to societal turmoil. More recently, Malcolm Shayun's articles have used this analytical lens to make sense of the craziness that is early 2020s America, and more recently Canada. In a nutshell, Western civilization has reached a point in history where, for a variety of reasons, there are simply too many people from middle to upper class backgrounds and not enough well-paying jobs to go around. Many of these folks, perhaps you are one of them, profess to love the working class, yet would rather be burned alive than drive an Uber or stock shelves at Walmart. This group is largely composed of millennials who've got a university degree, maybe two, maybe some post-grad, and in one form or another are chasing that elusive six-figure office job. Support from this class of people is essential for the regime's survival. If history is any indication, governments can survive many years despite appearing illegitimate in the eyes of the poor and working classes. But when the middle class start to turn their backs, it is only a matter of time before heads start falling. Societal stability in the West is currently held together by the regime's attempts to prop up a bloated middle class. This is achieved in part via direct employment through the state, but also more perniciously through an array of regulations that require corporations to hire their own bureaucrats in human resources, inclusiveness, sustainability, and so forth. There are now entire industries whose sole purpose is to put on workshops for corporate and government clients, teaching employees about white privilege and how not to misgender the bearded dude in the dress. Malcolm Shayoun has highlighted how recent flare-ups over wokeness can in part be understood in the context of this jobs program for the middle class. There is also a certain expectation on the part of the billionaires to bear some of this cost. Whereas philanthropists of the past spent money directly either on the poor, patronizing the arts, or on various public works, today's megalomaniacs fund foundations and NGOs that employ tens of thousands of overproduced elite engaged in BS, but nonetheless respectable work. A parasitic stratum of society, euphemistically referred to as knowledge workers, is therefore sustained by extracting a surplus from those who actually produce value. This is cleverly cloaked in myriad institutions and ideologies that give people the impression that a gender studies professor or bankruptcy lawyer is as vital to keeping things running smoothly as a trucker or a nurse. The delicious but tragic irony of the situation is further compounded by the fact that our jobs, aside from adding zero value, are also unneeded by those within our own class of office dwellers. While our most vital functions, such as preparing and presenting data, can easily be outsourced for pennies on the dollar to someone in Pakistan, most of our work is simply not needed at all. If all the drivers for Uber Eats and DoorDash stopped showing up, many millennials would feel it right away. But if your job was terminated, or the unit in which you work for was abolished, the world would likely keep on spinning. I worked as a consultant at an international development agency. Our department was in charge of collecting surveys on establishments in countries we had given loans to, and subsequently analyzing the data. Said data was repackaged into a variety of reports, blog posts, and academic papers, the presence of which is used to justify our very existence. Those of you who've worked at NGOs and think tanks know this song and dance all too well. Although the work that went into the data collection and quality control was arduous and admirable, the value this added to society was minimal. Governments have access to firm-level census data, making our contribution to efficient policymaking questionable at best. To be fair, much of our research output was used, but by university professors and researchers in other development institutions to publish papers which nobody reads, but are used to justify the dubious value of their own low six-figure salaries. A white-collar circle jerk, indeed. If anything, our unit's very presence in the form of staff salaries and implementation costs raised the cost of debt to the poor countries our organization ostensibly wants to help. Our unit consisted of around 30 economists and consultants, the majority of whom earned over 120,000 American dollars a year. So, some brown or black dude living in a house with sheet metal on his roof has some of the value he produced, usually in the form of value-added taxes in the developing world, extracted to pay middle-class people in a rich country to pretend like we're actually doing something of value. No matter how much we rationalize it away, reality reasserts itself. The meaninglessness of our work manifests itself through frustration, fatigue, emptiness, and ultimately depression. We tell ourselves that the paid but pointless busy work we engage in, despite its many drawbacks, is a rational decision, since it provides us with a life that is just bearable, as if that is all we can aspire to. And heaven knows what awaits us should we quit. Yet we have now entered a moment in history where a growing number of those who cling to the trappings of middle-class life are discovering that the meager juices offered by the BS jobs offered are no longer worth the spiritual squeeze. With today's soaring costs of housing and inflation at 40-year highs, does $120,000 a year in gross income get you very far? If you intend to raise a family, how can you realistically have anything left over to save for your eventual escape? Will your organization raise your salary to keep up with inflation? At best, you may be able to afford a modest house, 2 cars, and an annual vacation somewhere not too fancy without going further into debt, treading water as it were. For such benefits, you will pay dearly as the years slip by and you avoid discovering and then excelling at the tasks your Creator put you on this planet to accomplish. Discover what value you can provide and do it. Raise cattle, grow crops, repair diesel engines, help install the wiring of buildings, or write a novel or screenplay. A new artistic movement based on subverting the regime has yet to be born. Will you be one of its midwives? If you have an entrepreneurial flair, how about starting a business whose proceeds can fund those who stand up to the regime, whose employees do not live in fear of being fired for 10-year-old tweets, who are not forced to attend anti-white struggle sessions, and who are not subjected to medical mandates? There is a nascent parallel economy in the works. Be a part of it. Even the most rewarding work is still that, work. There will be many days in your new life where you may very well work to the point of exhaustion, as is sometimes required in the pursuit of anything worthwhile. Yet you will find it to be a different type of exhaustion than what you were accustomed to. For though you may be tired, the lingering stress, irritation, knowing that you will have to do it all over again tomorrow, the subconscious anger at having wasted another day in meaningless spreadsheets and conference calls will vanish. You will sleep like a baby, and your body and mind will recharge for another day of adventure and progress. In leaving behind your desk job in search of value and meaning, you are also striking a blow at the regime's legitimacy. Quitting alone shakes the regime, and mainstream outlets have begun to note an alarming trend in the corporate world. It's becoming harder to hold on to employees. When I told my last boss that I was no longer interested in a future with the organization and would leave once my contract expired, she was taken aback. Her first response was to mention that a new position, paying in the low 6 figures, was opening up, that I was the first on their radar for the job. This was honestly incredibly tempting, but I declined. Know that many people in your organization are also thinking of quitting. But actually seeing someone do it snaps them out of the trance that may give them the courage to follow through as well. I see nothing wrong with politely explaining that you do not derive meaning and satisfaction from your current job, and that you are searching for more fulfillment during your precious years as a productive person. You would be surprised at how many nerves you may strike with this simple claim. Finally, know that in quitting your regime job, you'll be able to enjoy a freedom you may never have thought existed. You can finally avoid aliases on social media, can freely speak your mind in person or online without having to worry about someone snitching to your boss. You can board public transportation or enter various buildings without having to wear a face diaper. If Karen gets mad and takes out her iPhone and starts recording you, you do not have to worry, since there will be no woke HR department for people to call. You will be in charge of your livelihood. If these words have kindled a spark in your soul, it's time to set yourself a deadline for exiting if you have not already. Plan accordingly, give yourself some wiggle room, but know that there will never be a perfect moment. You must have faith.